So the statistics on poverty and economic mobility suggest that the American dream is slipping away. And the Census Bureau shows an official poverty rate of 15%, and 1 in 5 children lives in poverty. So Greg, you've done extensive research on poverty and low-wage work. Can you tell us what the poverty data do or do not show?
Sure. The poverty rate is a very useful indicator for short-term changes in well-being. The poverty rate's 15% today. It's been there for about 3 years. It was as low as 11.3% back in 2000. It's really been between 11 and 15% for quite a while. What it means to be poor is that your income is below $23,000 a year, and whether that number is too high or too low is a topic for conversation. But what we measure in the official poverty rate in terms of income and resources available, we come up short there. The income in terms of poverty is counted as post-transfer pre-tax, which means we don't count the earned income tax credit and we don't count food stamps, two of our larger anti-poverty programs. We spend over $100 billion a year on those programs. We don't count it. We should. Poverty also is measured over a year period, and a lot of people can drop into poverty and bounce right back. And what we really want to worry about in terms of mobility are those who are persistently poor. For kids, for example, a child who was born into poverty, half those kids are going to spend half their childhoods in poverty, at least 9 out of 18 years in poor. When you think about the disadvantages that accumulate, that's why it's so hard to move people out of poverty and up the economic ladder.
And that's a great segue to Aparna. You've written about income inequality and mobility and other economic factors. So can you shed some light on whether or not those who do grow up or start poor, do they have the opportunity to move up that economic ladder?
Right. If you talk about income inequality, traditionally the way income inequality is defined is the share of income going to the top 20% relative to the share of income going to the bottom 20%, and then every quintile in between. And data from the Congressional Budget Office suggests that the share at the top has typically been about 10 to 11 times higher than the share going to the bottom 20%. So income inequality is high. Not only is it high, it's actually been widening over time. If you compare the shares from 1979 to 2010, which is the latest year for which we have data, you find that people at almost every income quintile have averaged an income, post-tax income increase of about 40 to 45%. But if you look at the very top 1%, they've increased their incomes by about 200%. So that's why you see so much debate about income inequality in the media and in policy circles.
So given that, and throughout history, we've used public policy strategies to really help families make it through those economic difficulties and provide a safety net. So what are some of the policies that states can look to in order to address these issues of poverty, inequality, mobility?
One of the policy ideas that we talk about in our work at AEI is expanding the earned income tax credit. The EITC is a federal program that has been successful at getting single mothers into the labor market and radically sort of helping people in poverty, helping people escape poverty. So expanding the EITC is a proposal that has been out there, is sort of adopted by both sides. I would say Democrats and Republicans agree to expanding the EITC. And doing it both at the federal level and at the state level would be critical and important to getting these women out into the workforce. The EITC is also important for improving work opportunities for low-wage men. So we also talk about expanding the EITC to single adults, be they men or women, and not just focusing it on the family or parents with children. A second way to help single mothers in poverty is to expand the child care tax credit. The child care tax credit has been shown to improve the labor supply outcomes for women, and it has not been expanded since 1976. So expanding the child care tax credit to make it something that working women, single women can use to offset the cost of child care is also important.
When you talk about kids who are in persistently poor families throughout their childhood, there's accumulation of problems from the lack of resources to the stress that puts on the families to all the correlates of being poor, poor neighborhoods, poor schools. So chipping away at the problem is hard, and it needs sort of consistent efforts through the life course. So let's begin at the very beginning. Unplanned pregnancies are a tremendous problem for children that are born as the result of those pregnancies. They're much more likely to be low birth weight with the attendant health problems and learning problems that come after it. Their mothers are more likely to not have finished high school or not be completed their educations. Their fathers are in the same position. And if we could reduce unplanned pregnancies so women could have children when they wanted them, those children would be in a much better position to succeed. In medical costs alone, money spent on family planning pays off 5 to 1 in terms of reduced medical costs. So starting at the very beginning, the next stage, you have a kid who's in a low-income family. There are programs that have demonstrated effects that are quite significant at improving reading, math scores, and behavior, in other words, improving school readiness. For example, the home instruction for parents of preschool youth, the HIPPY program, not a great acronym, has very large positive impacts, close to 3/4 of a standard deviation on reading, math, and behavior scores. That's a really big effect in social science. It's a high-touch program, but it does pay off down the line. When you get kids into elementary school, there are other programs such as Success for Youth, social emotional learning that have demonstrated positive effects on reading, math, and behavior. So then you have kids progressing in school, learning, they're behaving better, they're not getting suspended, they're getting to the point where they're getting ready to graduate from high school. Some of those kids will be in a position now to go on to college and take that track, but not all of them will be, and we have to ensure that there are alternative pathways to success. And some of those programs could be things like apprenticeships, which Aparna has talked about, which take youth and put them with employers, learning the skills they will need on the job. We don't do too much with apprenticeships in the U.S. Germany does. It's a fairly successful program. Down the line, there are programs on the local level, sectoral training programs where you have employers communicating with training providers like community colleges to provide training that is linked to the needs of local employers. So it's not just taking classes or getting a certificate because it sounds good, but because there are jobs at the end of it. These are the needs that employers. And that sort of communication and partnership of employers with training providers addressing low-income populations and their skill development needs can be very effective. So it's through the life course to chip away at the problems that to improve the mobility for those who are raised in poor families.
Great. Thank you both. You provided a variety of options for states to look at in terms of addressing this problem and keeping the American dream alive. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.